I know I look very tired, I don't have any makeup on, I am tired, but I need to start this vlog because today we're starting actually rewriting Rules of Survival. I keep putting this off. That's not true. I keep doing other tasks that are essential for me to do this, and we're finally done with all the other tasks, and we are now sitting at the precipice of finally writing draft 2. So in case you are new here and this is your first time watching my channel, Rules of Survival is my latest novel. I finished draft 1 in 2025 over the span of 6-7 months and after 90,000 words. It is a space horror survival type of story inspired by the likes of really big franchises like Alien and Resident Evil, but in space. And my main character, Themis, is someone who went on a very dangerous mission a year ago and came back with only half of her crew alive, and she blames herself very much so for what happened. But when she realizes that the pharmaceutical company she works for has decided to spend a new crew, including some of the remaining members of her crew, on a trip to that planet where everything happened, Themis decides to take matters into her own hands and to invite herself on that trip as the captain and to invite someone else on that trip, my main male character Axel, the security consultant that she believes can help them survive this round. This is a story of zombies. I have been very open about the entire process on my channel in 2025. I basically documented the entire journey to writing draft 1, and then towards the end I reread my draft 1, and that was my first revision vlog. I technically just reread everything, left some notes in the margins, and that was it. And then I did another vlog where I basically buffed up my world building Notion pages for this book and just tried to make sense of all the little tech notes I had. And then revision vlog 3, which I have not edited yet but will obviously be published by the time you watch this one, was me using the story grid by Coin to try and make sense of a reverse outline for this book. Essentially, I did a to-do list for every single scene within this big, huge database of all my scenes. It was really easy because it allowed me to jump from one scene to the next and to see all of them all at once together. So that helped me tons. And I feel like that was necessary work before actually getting into the revisions. Because now I am feeling so much more confident about what I'm going to do to draft 2, the things I'm going to change, the things that are going to need a full rewrite or brand new scenes even, and the things that I'm going to delete, but also the things that are going to remain and that I'm going to keep as they are. So today is Wednesday the 25th of February, and here's a quick update on where I am at. I have now reached chapter 3, so I've written 4 scenes in total, which is like not that many, but keep in mind I started on the 18th and I have been writing pretty consistently every single day. I'm just checking my timeline as well because I do keep track of every word, like the amount of words that I write per day. And I've had like 2 days where I wrote over 1,500 words, which is pretty good. That's a good amount. My manuscript is currently sitting at 8,300 words or so, and that's about 1.5 to 2k words more than where it was at in draft 1 at this stage in this chapter. And that's because my latest scene that I just finished, so the last scene in chapter 2, had a lot more information that I wanted to put in there, and I hope I did not info dump it, but I changed something pretty big about Themis' character, which I did mention in one of my vlogs, and this came in play a lot in that chapter in particular. Originally, I just wanted to use a disease that exists and that we know, and also that would serve as like a plot point for later on why she's immune to the substance, and doesn't get turned even though she's bitten at some point. And I want it to be something linked to the planet and the fact that it's a jungle planet, it doesn't get much sunlight, and that the substance doesn't like sunlight and UV rays. And so I went onto this whole thing about like maybe it's because she's had radiotherapy, so it's like rays, you know, but it didn't really make sense, and it had some plot holes, such as the fact that it doesn't stay in your body after you've had it. And I ended up creating this new disease that exists in my sci-fi world, so doesn't actually exist in real life, which I called First Earthers disease. And it's essentially something linked to the fact that descendants of people from the first Earth did not adapt well to a circumbinary planet, so a planet that orbits two suns. And I made a whole thing about it, and actually I'm really happy with how I've introduced it. I really like the way that I've described it and the way that it impacts Themis' personality in so many other ways. Like, again, it's so fun when you find a plot fix that branches out and impacts so many other aspects and kind of makes a lot of sense with all of these other aspects. So I wanted this disease to also impact pigmentation if it's untreated, so of the hair and of the eyes in particular. And so the people who do not get it treated are pretty obvious. So I wrote this. I see them, the ones like me, who never seek treatment or can never afford it. They make up a majority of our homeless population, and they're hard to miss. Emaciated, the skin on their bones pulled down by gravity, the bags under their eyes digging deep into their skulls. But the clearest sign one has FED is the pigmentation of their eyes and hair. They become stark white, like snow. It makes them look like wandering ghosts, thin and faded, ready to blow in the wind. And then the doctor notes that she's got a strand of hair that is white. Dr. Liao stares pointedly at one particular strand of my hair. I grimace under his scrutinizing gaze. I promise I'm taking them on schedule, doctor. I twist the strand in front of my eyes, squinting to see it better. White, clashing severely with the rest of my otherwise dark hair. This dates back to my teenage years. I found many ways to rebel against my parents' authority, but this one was particularly stupid. Skip the dose, just the once. Dr. Liao writes something down on his terminal. This wasn't in your file. I used to dye it, I reply with a sorry smile. I just don't care anymore. The part I don't say is who I dyed it for. Carson really did not want his parents to find out about my condition, especially as a member of the famed Wensley Hart dynasty. It would have been worse than a faux pas, and it would have meant the dissolution of our engagement. Not that I could save it anyway, in the end. So this is the part that I'm happy I have included this for, because I do feel like there's more to the way that the relationship with Carson fell through, and it has to be more than just the events that happened a year ago on Mission Eternity. And so I like that this has added in a layer of this wasn't the perfect couple, and there were some things that were not going great, including the way that he was asking her to be or behave in front of his family, because he comes from a prestigious family, which is addressed in a later scene, but still. And I also really like this idea that Themis' appearance has changed a year on, because she would have been someone, like, it's a representation of her personality and the changes that she went through after Mission Eternity, because she would have been the girl who was dyeing her hair, and then she's not. She's the woman who doesn't care anymore, who doesn't give a fuck about her appearances anymore, because that's not what matters. And I really do like that, because initially I did have this idea that, oh, she had longer hair and then she cut it short because it's easier to maintain. But that just isn't a super strong visual, and I feel like that white strand of hair, I feel like, represents that even more so and is a more impactful visual. So yeah, that's where I'm at. It ticked off quite a lot of bullet points in my reverse outline. Sorry that I went all white, but my Notion is not on dark mode, and so the lighting is suddenly a lot brighter. So I'm about to dive into chapter 3. I don't have too many changes, but I did make some research yesterday while I was pondering the next scene in the next chapter, and I'm gonna change Lucky's job. He's one of the crew members that goes with the team but was not part of Mission Eternity, so he's only there as part of the second mission. And I initially had him as a co-pilot, but I feel like it's kind of unnecessary to have a redundant job. Like, Carson is fine being the sole pilot, And a lot of other people on the team would have had training to understand the basics of piloting, and a lot of the piloting isn't necessary because you have an AI to do it for you. But I was thinking maybe Isabel, who is Space Force Academy trained as well, would maybe double as a co-pilot because of that fact. And so Lucky is just another scientist, another science researcher. So I wanted to make him a planetary geologist. The only thing is it will change his personality slightly, because I feel like his personality in draft 1 was very much linked to him being sort of very like new, fresh out of the academy, buzz cut and everything, and sort of looking at Carson in an impressed way, because that's the main pilot, and wanting to impress him, and so very like kid-like in that sense. So I just sort of need to change some things around, and almost I could probably still keep him being like a little bit wide-eyed and, you know, naive and like new at this. And maybe that's where the dynamic is like tripping Themis, is that she sees how Lucky is acting a little bit like Saturn used to act. And Lucky's one of the first ones that they try and fail to save, because someone else dies first, but then Lucky disappears for a little while and you assume he's dead. And while this happens, Themis is immediately like, we have to go and get him and save him, and insists on going, even though at the time Axel wants to go by himself. And I think that this will impact her more because she saw how this could have impacted Saturn, and Saturn was like the baby of the crew in the first mission, and so she sees Lucky in a similar light, if that makes sense. So a lot of things are connecting and interconnecting, and I'm really enjoying myself once again, even in this draft too. I don't think I've ever had such a good time doing revisions. Like, I did discover I didn't hate revisions, and then slowly started enjoying some parts of it more and more as I was working on The Art of Summoning Demons, which is my first book. But this book, I think I have truly enjoyed every part, and doing the reverse outline and now doing revisions for draft 2, I'm really enjoying myself. Okay, so here's a quick update, because today is Saturday the 7th of March, and I'm currently at a total of 18,543 words into draft 2, and I am done with a total of 9 scenes, and I am now progressing with scene number 10, which means we're really close to finishing Act 1, but that's where I need to talk to you about things. So, like, first of all, this week I've done something really good, which is that I have written an entire new scene. So I think I explained that I wanted a scene with Saturn similar to the one with Freddy, where Saturn and Themis meet up individually to talk about what's going on, why they're going on the trip. I sort of wanted to establish Saturn's character a little bit better, and I feel like I did, and I have a better understanding myself of Saturn's character, and the fact that, like, I didn't realize before that they're a cheeky type of person, and that they're like extremely joyful and smiley and teasing, and I don't know, like, there's a few things I discovered while writing the scene. So I'm happy I've written the scene. However, I'm still at a stage where I don't know how useful the scene is, and I'm still doubting whether it was useful to have it in the plot, in the book. Like, I don't know if it makes sense to keep it. Now, I'm not gonna delete it. I have spent some time, so this week, I think on Tuesday I wrote it, and then on the stream with Stieg on Thursday, I spent some time rereading it during an entire sprint, and then modifying bits here and there. I felt very rusty. Like, I was just like, how do I write brand new scenes again? I feel like drafting when your brain has switched on into editing mode is really difficult, and it's just like you have to remind yourself of how you used to do it. Not that it's been that long, but it's just that it's more the mindset shifts and the fact that I've changed from one mode to another, and then having to switch back into another mode was a little bit hard. My second problem, which is not like a big problem per se, because I'm still pretty confident with the general plot and the way things are going in the book, but I was trying to figure out how to section it in terms of, okay, by that scene I'll be done with Act 1 and then I can, you know, take a break in the vlogging and then I'll move on to Act 2A and that will be a new vlog. Because I was thinking in terms of what I'm gonna show you guys, it makes more sense to maybe cut it between acts. But because of that, I had to like make a bit of a list of my scenes and try to figure out, I wanted to see whether they were equal in size, my acts, and whether they had the same amount of scenes, or approximately. I have a total of 49 scenes, which includes the 3 new scenes I had ideas for, so some might be cut again, some might be like, oh, that's actually 2 scenes, I don't know. So 49 divided by 4 is approximately 12 scenes-ish, right? Although it's the 3-act structure, technically it's a 4-act structure, I'm sorry, but like Act 2A and Act 2B are 2 separate acts in my head, and I've always thought about it that way. So it is 4 acts, really. But then I realized I really have 6 big movements, almost. It's almost like I'm functioning with 6 acts in total within this plot. And I don't know if that's okay or not. So I was like Googling it and finding that there is a 6-act structure, and I was trying to figure out, does my book match the 6-act structure? But it was getting into a whole loop of things and just like so much to research, and my dog keeps trying to climb on my lap, which is ridiculous. Scenes 1 to 11, we're still on Earth 2, but that does include some scenes on the Carpathia just while it's still on Earth 2. And then we finally leave Earth 2 and we go into space and we're on our way. It's sort of the moment where it's like it's one of the points of no return, right? Like it's one of the moments where they're like, okay, now we're doing this. We're not on our planet anymore, so we have to like commit to this. So in my head I was like, that could be Act 1. In the next movement, I have the scenes when they're on the Carpathia in space until the point where they see the graveyard of ships around Panacea. So they arrive to Panacea, the planet, and they see around it a graveyard of ships, and they realize, so it's like a huge point as well of no return, because they realize how many other crews were sent by Vortex, and that in fact they're not the only ones to come back. So I feel like that in itself is a big moment, which is why I felt like, okay, this could be another big move within the book. The scenes on the Carpathia are the ones where there is something happening within that section, which is the crew getting to know each other. And I feel like that in itself is Themis's interactions with these characters. However, I realized, and this is why I'm so confused, that she does start interacting with these characters earlier on. And it's almost like while she's on Earth 2, there's another split, which is Themis's life by herself, unsatisfying, up until the point where she realizes she's not going to have a choice, she's going to have to become their captain, and she crashes sort of their reunion and their meeting at Vortex's headquarters. And so we see back all these characters from her past life, from the first mission, as well as introducing Axel to her, and we have like Axel's first scene in there as well. And I feel like that in itself is a shift. That in itself is like status quo to now I'm taking on a different role. And that is part of the 6-act structure, but I was like, this doesn't match my current split of things. We have a mini section, because it's only scene 18, 19 to 20, so 3 scenes in total, which is the early exploration of Ambrosia Alpha up until the point where the crew decides to vote to stay, and so they make the decisions to stay. I actually don't know if this should be split, so in my head I was thinking scenes 12 to 20 in the 3 normal act structure is Act 2A. So it's essentially from the Carpathia, graveyard of ships, early exploring, and then the decision they vote to stay. Because that's another point of no return. I felt pretty confident about this, but then I was like, it's so much less intense that the moment they realize, oh shit, there's a bunch of ships in this graveyard of ship thing. And I was like, is that where I'm supposed to cut Act 2A? But then it's so much shorter than Act 2B. Section 4 in this 6-section breakdown would then be scenes 21 to 31, so 10 scenes, which is essentially the climb down. Like, it's from bad to worse. Things are going worse and worse as they continue exploring after making the decision to stay, up until the point where zombies wake up. So the last scene in that section is another big reveal, big thing. It's, oh, there are zombies. Here's the first one. And then scene 32 to 37 are them essentially fighting for their lives, running, and trying not to die because of the zombies. So it's the zombie time, essentially. It also has a moment of loss and a moment of getting back up from that loss. And that is essentially what Save the Cat calls the dark night of the soul moment. And then you also have like an epiphany within that moment. And that is the end of Act 2B in the classic structure. I still think in my own 6, sections structure, that's the end of that section. And then the last section is essentially getting out alive. It is from scene 38 to 49, and it's the moment they sort of have a half-assed plan. They decide to get on the move. We need to get out of there alive. It's the run from, and it's essentially they are like on Ambrosia Alpha, then they get to the shuttle, then they get to space and to the Carpathia. So that's kind of my 6 sections. And my main issue is when I try to break it down into 4 sections so that it becomes Act 1, Act 2A, Act 2B, and Act 3, I have a lot of events that are points of no return and a lot of moments that are like, that's a really intense revelation or that's a really intense action scene or moment. It changes everything. I have a lot of those. And because I have a lot of those, I don't know which ones matter more at points. And I'm like, is this my midpoint? Is this my break into 2? Is this? And that's why, because I had a really solid idea of that when I first wrote the outline for this book, and I feel like after writing the book this idea has shifted a little bit. And I feel like one of the issues that this stems from is that this book is really mashing together action, and that's a plot in itself, and the character development of Themis and her own, sort of internal plot. And because of that, I get a little bit confused at times between the two, especially since I like myself to have a mixture of Save the Cat, which is more like plot heavy, like external plot heavy, and the character arcs method from K.M. Whalen's book, which is internal plot heavy, obviously, because it's character development. I'm gonna do some handwriting notes of all of my big moments and have a think about which ones I think are actually the turning points of the novel. I've done 2 sheets. This is the first one, and I was just listing all the big events that would be potential turning points, and then I was trying to match them to structures I know exist. So I got, at this point, my inciting event, which is Themis realizing Vortex has resumed their operations on Panacea. I got my first plot point, which is scene 9, which is when Themis decides, okay, I will for sure end Vortex's activities after talking to Freddy and Saturn individually and realizing that they are both in complete denial and have been promised things by Vortex, and the only way to stop Vortex is to go on the mission for sure. I have my midpoint, which I decided was when Themis gets attacked by Kovac, kills him, and awakens the dead everywhere. I have my, I guess, third plot point, which is my break into 3. Which would be when Themis gets Kovac's last message before he died and grows determined again to get back up, get back to the plan, find Saturn, and get out of there alive. And then obviously I have my resolution, which is sort of around the time Carson decides to sacrifice himself, which allows Themis to ensure that the substance will not make it back to Earth too. And then I made another sheet, which is actually double-sided. And that was me trying to think out of the box and me trying to think outside of the structures I know for sure exist, but using everything I have learned from those structures. And I realize I have what is sort of a 5-act structure within my book. 2 things I noticed. The first one is that my events that happen are linked together between revelation, big reveal or discovery, leading to a decision. And so I have my setup scenes, which are at the very beginning, scenes 1 to 4. It's essentially Themis being a freelance consultant, her life, blah, blah, blah. And then the hook, which is within scene 2, which is when we realize that a year ago, half her crew died on Panacea and she blames herself. And my inciting incident, which is the moment she realizes that Vortex reprised their activities on Panacea because there's footage of the security cameras from less than a year ago. She decides to ignore it. So this is the first reveal / discovery, the inciting event, which will lead to the first decision, which is in my scene 4, when Themis gets finally the list of all crew members and that she decides to go back as their captain and join Mission Lazarus. However, this is where I realized this is only 4 scenes and it's my beginning. And then there's more scenes where we're staying on Earth too. And there's quite a lot of scenes where I'm sort of establishing the characters' relationships and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't actually think that it is that boring. And I realized what I've done is I've split my first decision moment. So my beat where Themis goes from passive to active, I've split it into several scenes because I have the moment she first decides this, where she goes, well, guess I'm joining this little reunion, I'm going to Vortex headquarters, blah, 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 I'm going to be back as their captain. And the moment where after she has talked to Freddy and Saturn, and after she's had that briefing and everything, she's more determined than ever to go because she realizes, oh, they are in it for the wrong reasons and they will die out there. And I need to bring my dirty bombs that she's had pre-made. So she's like going from scene 4 to scene 9, which is an extra 4 scenes, from I think I should go to I'm going 100%. There's no way back now. So actually my first act within this 5-act structure, I guess, is from scene 1 to scene 9. And I wrote there, basically, I have 2 points. I actually highlighted this way too early, so it erased half of the words. But I've got first decision to then reinforced decision. And that's essentially my whole first decision. So actually, the end of that would be scene 9, which means I've technically already written it. We then go from scene 10, which is the first scene that we have on the Carpathia, to scene 20. And that would be my second act within this structure. And that's about 11 scenes. In those scenes, we have our first pinch point, I guess, which again, I'm taking terminology from other structures that exist, which is our first reveal / discovery after the inciting incident. So the inciting incident was a reveal / discovery that then led to this first decision. We're now at our pinch point, which is discovering the graveyard of ships around Panacea and realizing that Vortex lied and that they had been sending crews and everyone's died. That will then lead several scenes later at scene 20 to the second decision, which is the crew decides to stay. Themis then decides to go ahead with her plan because she's like, okay, I guess we're staying. I guess Vortex is even more evil than we thought. It's time to really end their activities by bombing the place. So that would be my second sort of act, which then leads to my third one, where we have in between some exploration scenes. So this is a lot about being on Panacea, exploring, Ambrosia Alpha, the settlement, etc. We then have our second pinch point, which is finding the dead bodies. So this is another reveal / discovery. Axel and Themis find dead bodies in one of the habitats, but not enough to be everyone. So she realizes there are more dead people out there and we do not know where they are. And that's going to be a problem. So that's another reveal / discovery, which then leads to a climax, I guess I called it. And I would keep it as a midpoint in a 3-act structure. And it's essentially, it's not a decision, but it's an action / reaction to what's happened. So I'm counting it as like this back and forth between discovery to action or reaction to the discovery. And this is when Themis, because of the discovery of dead bodies, this leads to Themis being attacked by Kovac, killing him, and therefore awakening the dead all around the jungle, all around Panacea. That is kind of my third act, which is another 10 scenes. So far they're quite equal. It's like I've got 9 scenes, then 11, then 10. Then we get to pinch point number 3, I guess, which is another reveal / discovery, which is Axel and Themis reveal when they're cut off from the rest of the crew that there is a traitor on board who's trying to get them killed while they're running for their lives. And this is where I was sort of like, I guess this is not part of this event discovery leading to a reaction or an action. But there is also in there the all is lost moment, which is Saturn kills Freddy because of not understanding that they're immune, and then they run away, which leads to then Themis feeling like she's to blame for everything, and this is the all is lost moment. But I feel like it doesn't really go in this dichotomy thing that I've set up. I just added it because it's a big plot point. But then all of these, so like the pinch point and the all is lost moment, lead to what I've called a new hope, which is essentially the third decision. And this is Themis gets Kovac's last message, and this reinvigorates her. She grows determined again to stop Vortex, to find Saturn, etc., to set into motion the finale. That's about 7 scenes or so, this fourth part / act. And then we get the finale, which has inside of it another pinch point moment / reveal, which is kind of Themis being at the mercy of Isabel, realizing Isabel's plan, etc., and being stuck until she can get out of there, which will lead to the fourth decision, because while her and Axel are both being held at gunpoint equally by Carson and then Isabel, they both discover ways to get out. But I kind of feel like this fourth decision / this reaction is more linked to my third decision, like the new hope. It's basically putting into motion this plan. So this kind of rejoins the Save the Cat beat sheet, where it's like, oh, here's a plan, we try to execute it, here's, you know, someone stopping us, oh, let's get back a new plan into motion so that we can actually get this done. And that's kind of what happens there. So this is the moment where she plans their way out with the help of Axel, they find Saturn, etc. And then the resolution, which is scene 47, which is when Carson sacrifices himself, allowing Themis and Axel to make it back to the Carpathia, the ship, and to make sure that there is no substance on board the ship. And then I have the aftermath, what I've called the aftermath, which is scenes 48 and 49, which is kind of, you know, they're alive, sorting things out, basically what happens after the final resolution. And that finale sort of act is about 12 scenes. So that's kind of my made-up structure that I think my book is following. I know there exists a 5-act structure. When I look at it, I'm not entirely sure that it fits this. And I got more and more confused the more I was looking into 3-act structure, 4-act structure, 5-act structure, 6-act structure, 7-act structure. There's an infinity of them. And I think the easiest way for me to not be confused was just to not try. I'm not trying to re-outline this book. I'm happy with the outline of it. I'm not trying to change the structure of it, but I'm trying to determine what my structure actually is now that it's written. And I realized that it still works for me because I'm happy with having discovery, reveal, leading to a decision, discovery, reveal, leading to a decision or a reaction or an action, discovery, reveal, leading, etc. And I think that's the balance I wanted to ensure exists within the book. So I'm happy with this, despite it not really following the standard 3-act structure that everyone knows. So yeah, this is where we're at. I don't know why I needed to do this exercise for my peace of mind, but now that it is done, I'm ready to continue writing. I did discover that I have therefore technically this week finished my first act out of these. This is the moment we get to the reinforced first decision. So when Themis has talked to Freddy and then Saturn and decides, okay, they're in it for the wrong reasons, I need to go. And that was the last scene I was writing. And then I started a little bit of the next scene after that. So I will keep that for the next vlog, which means we're done with this first part of editing this book. This is a little bit of a messy process because I'm discovering my own process as I go, but I'm still happy with it. I'm still excited for it. And everything I've done so far in this editing process has made me really excited for this book, even more so than when I was drafting it. So it's still good news. We're still good. If you enjoyed this vlog, leave a like, leave a comment down below. I try to respond to those all the time. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you, and stay tuned for the next episode of this. See you in the next one.